Study Session 6. Social Stratification. In this study session, we will examine the meaning and forms of stratification. We will also discuss some other issues on stratification, such as open class and closed class system. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to explain the meaning of social stratification, list the types of social mobility, explain the concept of open versus closed class system, describe at least 4 key elements of the Great Transformation, and explain the class consciousness and class conflict in stratification system of modern societies. What is social stratification? Social stratification is a society's system for ranking people hierarchically according to various attributes such as wealth, power, prestige, income, age, sex, ethnicity, and religion. Numerous social scientific studies have demonstrated that all human societies produce some form of inequality. Fowler's 1997 and types of social mobility. There are 2 types of social mobility identified by Sorokin 1959 and contemporary sociologists. They are 1. Horizontal mobility. 2. Vertical mobility. Horizontal mobility. It refers to the movement of a person from one social position to another of the same rank. If we use the prestige rankings, for example, an airline pilot who becomes a police officer would experience horizontal mobility. This is so because each occupation has the same prestige ranking. If the police officer later leaves Northwest Police Department for a similar job in the Southwest, he or she would once again experience horizontal mobility. Vertical mobility. This is the movement of a person from one social pattern to another of a different rank. For example, an airline pilot who becomes a lawyer would experience vertical mobility. So too will an airline pilot who becomes a bank teller, that is, a banker. Thus, vertical mobility can involve moving upward and downward in a society's stratification system. One way of examining vertical social mobility is to contrast intergenerational and intragenerational mobility. Intergenerational mobility. This involves changes in the social position of children relative to their parents. Thus, a plumber whose father was a physician provides an example of downward intragenerational mobility. On the other hand, a film star whose parents were both factory workers illustrates upward intergenerational mobility. Intragenerational mobility. This involves changes in a person's social position within his or her adult life. For example, a woman who enters the paid labor force as a class teacher and eventually experiences upward intergenerational mobility. On the other hand, a man who becomes a taxi cab driver after his accounting firm goes bankrupt undergoes downward intragenerational mobility. Open versus closed class systems. Sociologists use the term open class system and closed class system to distinguish between two ideal types of class systems in terms of social mobility. Open class system. An open class system implies that the position of each individual is influenced by the person's achieved status. In an open class system, competition between members of society is encouraged. Closed class system. This is a system in which there is little or no possibility of individual mobility. The slavery and caste system of stratification are examples of closed systems. In such societies, social placement is based on ascribed statuses such as race or family background, which cannot be changed. Key elements of Great Transformation. The Great Transformation is not enough, however, to describe the Industrial Revolution in terms of the spread of industrial technology and urban settlement. Technological innovations like steam engine, the railroad, the modernization of the textile industry, and new processes for making steel and mining coal were accompanied by equally important innovations in social institutions. The following key elements of the Great Transformation, among others, were identified by some sociologists and Polanyi in 1944. The following key elements of the Great Transformation, among others. I've read this. 1. Goods, land, and labor were transformed into commodities whose values could be calculated and translated into a specific amount of gold or its equivalent, that is, money. 2. Relationship that has been based on ascribed statuses was replaced with relationship based on contracts. A producer hired laborers, for example, rather than relying on kinship obligations or village loyalties to supply workers. 3. The business firm or corporation replaced the family, the manor, and the guild as the dominant economic institution. 4. In the new industrial order, demands for In the new industrial order, demands for full political rights and equality of opportunity, which originated with the bourgeoisie, that is, capitalists, slowly spread to the new class of wage workers, to the poor, and to women, especially in societies in which 4. In the new industrial order, demands for full political rights and equality of opportunity, which originated with the bourgeoisie, that is, capitalists, slowly spread to the new class of wage workers, to the poor, and to women, especially in societies in which revolutions created more open stratification systems. 5. Rural people displaced from the land began selling their labor for wages in factories and commercial firms in the cities. However, the demand for full political rights originated with the bourgeoisie, that is, the capitalists, which was to become the capitalist class in industrial societies, the owners of the factories, heavy equipment, and other means of producing wealth. Class consciousness and class conflict. The Great Transformation had a profound impact on the Great Transformation had a profound impact on the stratification systems of modern societies. Marx, 1962, is it 1962? 1962, 1867. Take two. Marx, 1962, 1867, believed that the class of wage workers created by capitalism would inevitably rise up against the capitalist class and create a classless socialist society. Marx's description of how members of the working class become conscious of their situation as a class remains an important subject in the study of stratification. Sources of class conflict. The following are sources of class conflict between two great classes directly facing each other: the bourgeoisie, that is the capitalist, and the proletariat, that is the working class, observed by Karl Marx, 1962-1867. 1. The mystery of industrial workers, that is many of whom were children in the smoky factories of industrial England. No, I'll read it again. 1. The misery of industrial workers, many of whom were children in the smoky factories of industrial England. 2. Marx saw that however wretched the workers were, there will always be what he called a reserve army of unemployed people who were willing to work for lower wages than those who already had jobs. 3. Marx noticed that the capitalists and the intellectuals Marx noticed that the capitalists and the intellectuals they paid to argue in their defense always blamed the workers themselves for the miserable conditions in which they were forced to exist. For example, if they were hungry, the capitalists claimed it was because they did not work hard enough, or because they spent their pay on too much alcohol, or because they did not curb their sexual passions and bore too many children. Thus, the capitalists refused to accept blame for the misery of the working class under capitalism. 4. Marx also argued that business competition would eliminate less successful firms and result in monopolies, which will control prices and wages and thereby contribute still more to the impoverishment of the workers. 5. The capitalists had the power to determine who ran the government and who controlled the police and the army. If the workers were to rebel, the armed forces and police would intervene as agents of the capitalists. Through these means, the workers and the unemployed would be forced to remain a huge, helpless population that could be manipulated by the capitalists. Level of class consciousness. Over time, according to Marx and his followers, proletariats, that is the working class, will become increasingly conscious of their plight and become Take two. Over time, according to Marx and his followers, proletariat, that is, the working class, would become increasingly conscious of their plight, and because of the reasons enumerated above, would unite in a revolution that would destroy the power of the capitalists or the bourgeoisies and their allies. But why would workers become more conscious of their situation as a class rather than merely remaining miserable in their impoverished families and communities? This problem of class consciousness became a central issue in Marxian thought. Class consciousness and class conflict envisaged the new social order known as socialism, that is, classless system, classless society. In this new social order, Marx and other observers of early capitalism believed that 1. The growing conflict between the working class, the proletariat, and the capitalist class, the bourgeoisie, would produce revolutions. 2. In those revolutions, the proletariat and its allies would depose the capitalists and establish a new social order known as socialism. 3. Under socialism, the institutions which are key institutions of capitalism, private ownership of means of production, the market as the dominant economic institution, and the nation state controlled by the bourgeoisie would be abolished. And 4. The new society would be classless because the economic institutions that produced classes would have been eliminated, and all members of society would collectively own the means of production. However, the Marxian view of class struggle remains one of the powerful forces given to social improvements. Given to social movements to reduce inequality in a society. Differences in views of stratification between Max Weber and Karl Marx. Marx's view. Marx had defined social class in economic terms, that is, classes are based on people's relationship to the means of production. Marx has only one dimension to stratification, that is, economic determinism in defining social class. Marx's view of stratification focuses on social mobility in industrial societies. To Marx, modern societies have become polarized into two great classes, the rich and the poor. Weber's view. Weber challenged this definition of social class. According to Weber, people are stratified not only by how they earn their living, but also by how much honor and prestige they receive from others and how much power they command. For Weber and many other sociologists, wealth or economic position is only one of the least three dimensions of stratification. For Weber, modern societies have not become polarized into two great classes, the rich and the poor. Instead, there is a large middle class of people who are neither industrial workers nor capitalists. Theories of stratification. In this section, we shall examine the three main theories of stratification, such as conflict theories, the functionalist view, and the interactionist perspective. Each of the major sociological perspectives continues to generate important insights into how stratification and inequality emerge and operate in different societies. Conflict theories. Marx's theory of stratification asserts that capitalist societies are divided into two opposing classes, wage workers and capitalists, and that conflict between these two classes will eventually lead to revolutions that will establish classless socialist societies. However, Marx's prediction was not borne out in any society that attempted to implement his ideas on a large scale. Deny it as it might, all of those societies developed well-defined systems of social stratification. Parkin, 1971, Gillas, 1982, Zelenyi, 1983. No persuasive evidence shows that class conflict is heightening in division between workers and owners of capital in capitalist societies. Conflict does not exist, but the industrial working class is shrinking, and the new occupational groups do not always share the concerns of the industrial workers. Moreover, reforms of capitalist institutions have greatly improved the workers' situation, thereby reducing the likelihood that the revolution predicted by Marx will occur. Functionalist view. The functionalist view of stratification was originally stated by Parsons, 1940, and Davis and Moore, 1945. This theory holds that social classes emerge because an unequal distribution of rewards is an essential need to reward talented people and channel them into roles that require advanced training, personal sacrifice, and extreme stress. Thus, the unequal distribution of rewards, which allows some people to accumulate wealth and deprives others of that chance, is necessary if society is to match the most talented individuals with the most challenging positions. From the point of view of those who are critical of social inequality, the large sums paid to a few people seem wrong, especially when so many others are struggling just to survive. But functionalist theory claims that it is, for in a capitalist system of free enterprise, top executives will seek the firms that are most willing to reward them for their talents. Those firms will benefit, and so will their workers. Interactionist perspective. Conflict theory explains stratification primarily in economic terms. So does functionalist theory. Both trace the existence of certain classes to the central position of occupation, income, and wealth in modern life. But neither goes very far towards explaining the prestige stratification that occurs within social classes. The point is that within economic classes, people opt for status groups whose prestige or honor is measured not according to what they produce or how much wealth they own, but according to what they buy and what they communicate about themselves through their purchase. The interactionist perspective on stratification, therefore, may not be very useful in explaining the emergence of economic classes, but it is essential to understanding the behaviors of the status groups that form within a given class. Those behaviors, in turn, often define or reinforce or challenge class divisions. The stratification system, in this view, is not a fixed system, but is created over and over again through the everyday behaviors of millions of people. Study session summary. In this study session, we examined the meaning of stratification and the general systems of stratification. We explained the relationships between horizontal and vertical social mobility. We examined also the social position of a person's upward and downward intergenerational and intragenerational mobility. We also examined the great transformation, class consciousness, and class conflict as a result of Industrial Revolution and stratification and social mobility. We described the elements of the Great Reformation, sources of class conflict, and the level of class consciousness as argued by Karl Marx. Furthermore, we described differences between Weber's view and Marx's view of stratification. We added that modern conflict theorists like Marx believe that class conflict is a primary cause of social change. Functionalist theorists believe that classes emerge because an unequal distribution of rewards is necessary in order to channel talented people into important roles in society. From interactionist perspective, the stratification system is not a fixed system, but rather one that is created out of everyday behaviors. End of study session 6. Thanks for listening.